The story begins with an army committing an unrelenting massacre. A boy, desperate to escape, ran as fast as he could but stumbled and fell. When he looked back, terror froze him in place as a soldier caught up. The boy cried out in desperation, "Somebody save me." But before his plea could even reach anyone, the soldier ended his life without hesitation, a wicked smile crossing the soldier's face as though such cruelty were routine. Leading this bloody charge was a gray-haired man, his demeanor cold and commanding. He was none other than the son of Margrave Cazelle, a feared and powerful magician said to carry the blood of the divine kings in his veins. His eyes bore both disdain and boredom as he addressed the terrified villagers. With an air of entitlement, he sneered, "Even beasts know that favors must be repaid. Don't you vermin understand why you're still alive?" His voice rose in scorn as he shouted at the crowd, "It's thanks to our grace, the grace of those with divine blood." Pausing briefly, his gaze swept over the terrified faces. "And yet, you dare try to flee because it hasn't rained for a while? How dare you be so impudent?" he thundered. A woman holding her young son fell to her knees, her voice trembling with desperation. I deeply apologize. Please, at least spare my child." Her plea was cut short as a soldier brutally drove his spear through her, silencing her forever. "Shut it," the soldier barked, as if such merciless acts were no more than routine discipline. The young boy beside her screamed in horror, his tiny hands trembling as he clutched at his mother's lifeless body. The young master clicked his tongue, his face twisted with annoyance. "Tsk, how can you be so thoughtless? You all are no fun," he muttered, his voice dripping with apathy. The soldier who had struck down the woman turned to him, eager to please. "I apologize for my ignorance, young master. What can we do to entertain you further?" The young master's lips curved into a sadistic smile. "Hang them," he commanded. The soldiers obeyed with cruel enthusiasm. They began stringing people up on the nearby trees. One soldier, almost laughing, placed his boot on the head of a wounded man lying on the ground. "This one's been stabbed already. Should I tie the rope around his waist so he lasts longer? Shouldn't he at least entertain us properly before he dies?" Nearby, a blonde-haired girl was frantically trying to stop the bleeding of her beloved. Tears streamed down her face as she cried out, "No, stop." Summoning all her courage, she stood and attempted to intervene, only to be slapped hard across the face by a soldier. "Get off already," he barked. As she crumpled to the ground, the girl whispered through gritted teeth, "Ifin." Her voice was barely audible over the cruel laughter of the soldiers. The young master observed the scene with twisted delight. His laughter echoed as the girl clung desperately to her husband's legs, which were bound to a tree. "Magnificent. Truly," he said, his tone chilling. He approached her slowly, crouching down to whisper in her ear, "Support him nicely, peasant girl. Without you, your beloved's veins will explode, and he will die." A commanding voice suddenly broke the macabre scene. "Please do not treat the blood of divine kings so lightly." The young master's gaze shifted to the source of the voice. "Huh," he muttered, surprised. Standing a short distance away was Sir Zebec, a knight with blonde hair and an air of authority. "Aha," the young master said, striding toward him. "If it isn't Sir Zebec, my sword instructor." Sir Zebec's expression remained grim as he said, "Is there any need to go this far when punishing people? A noble who carries the blood of a divine king should at least maintain their dignity." The young master chuckled, his arrogance unshaken. "Won't my dignity remain intact as long as word of what happens here doesn't escape?" He stepped closer, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "These fools dared to tarnish my dignity because it hasn't rained for a while. That is why they're in this state," he said coldly. Stopping just short of Zebec, he asked mockingly, "So then, what will you do, Sir Zebec? Will you spread word of what I've done? Will you, a holy knight acknowledged by the king's church, dare to besmirch the dignity of one who bears noble blood?" Sir Zebec met his gaze, unfaltering. "I simply meant to say that the truth cannot be hidden forever," he replied. For a brief moment, the young master's expression darkened. A soldier leaned in and whispered to him, "Shall we take care of him?" "Forget it," the young master replied dismissively. "Just get me a whip." A soldier handed him a whip, and without hesitation, the young master began lashing the blonde-haired girl still clinging to her husband. Her cries of pain filled the air, each scream a testament to the cruelty inflicted upon her. Sir Zebec's face twisted in horror as he stood silently, helpless to intervene. The young master only stopped when he grew bored, panting slightly from exertion. Looking down at the trembling girl, her back covered in fresh welts, he said, "Truly, it's a sight to behold." Satisfied, he turned and began walking away. Passing Sir Zebec, he smiled and said, "Simple, teach." Then, with a chilling expression that betrayed the depths of his cruelty, he added, "We should enjoy life, no?" Sir Zebec stood motionless for what felt like an eternity, his face unreadable as the atrocities of the day lingered in the air. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and orange, and darkness began to settle over the desolate scene. Nearby, the blonde-haired girl lay beside her husband's lifeless body, tears staining her face. Her trembling hand brushed against his leg when, to her shock, he whispered hoarsely, "Sophia." Her breath caught in her throat. She sat up quickly, clutching his legs as though trying to anchor him to life. "Ifan," she choked, her voice cracking with emotion. His voice, barely audible, carried an urgent plea. "I was wrong. Please, run." Tears streamed down her face as she held on to him tightly, unwilling to let go. "Ifan," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Will the Emperor's heralds really come?" Her gaze shifted to a small triangle etched into the ground. She stared at it for a long moment, then closed her eyes, clinging to a fragile hope. Night fell, and the air grew cold. Out of nowhere, water splashed onto her face, jolting her awake. She coughed and blinked rapidly, her voice filled with confusion. Just who? Standing above her was Sir Zebec. He crouched down and whispered, "Keep quiet." Her eyes widened as recognition dawned. "You are," he interrupted her, holding out a spoon filled with food. "Can you eat?" She stared at him, her body too exhausted to answer. Moments later, she fell asleep on the ground, unable to fight the fatigue any longer. Sir Zebec silently draped his cloak over her and sat beside her, his sword resting across his knees. His eyes remained fixed on the sky, as if searching for answers among the stars. A few hours later, his calm voice broke the silence. "Wake up." She stirred, opening her eyes groggily. He retrieved his cloak and stood, adjusting his sword. "I came here without anyone knowing," he explained. "I must leave before my presence is discovered. If the young master finds out, I will be severely punished." He glanced at her fiancé's body, tied to a stick and supported by ropes. With a heavy sigh, he added, "And about your fiancé, there is no need to hold him any longer." The stick fell with a soft thud, and she immediately threw herself at her fiancé's legs again, her cries muffled by the fabric of his tattered clothes. Through her sobs, she looked up at Sir Zebec and pleaded, "Please, tell me your name. When the Herald Clan comes, I will ask them to spare you." His expression hardened at her words. "The Herald Clan?" he asked, his voice tinged with disdain. "You mean the Slayers of Sanctity, those soulless heretics? You've contracted them? I don't know if they truly exist, but even if they come, Cazelle commands 20 well-armed soldiers, and the young master, he is one of blue blood. I'm sure you're aware of the incredible power of divine blood, the blood of Yaegas," he said, his tone heavy with warning. She looked up at him, her face pale but resolute. "Even if he's a magician, the Herald Clan is capable of killing him. After all, they're magicians too. The reason they're called the Slayers of Sanctity is because they earned that name by slaying those of divine blood, isn't it?" Sir Zebec let out a weary sigh, running a hand through his hair. "You're not in your right mind," he said softly. "Well, who would be after enduring such horrors?" He straightened his posture, his eyes filled with resolve. "I am Zebec, a holy knight of the King's Church. I tell you my name not to beg the Slayers of Sanctity for my life, but to affirm my duty. If they come, I will fight them with everything I have." He turned to leave, but paused briefly. "I will return at night," he said before disappearing into the shadows. As his figure vanished, the girl whispered faintly, 2 days, her gaze drifted back to the triangle she had drawn in the dirt. Her lips moved weakly as she repeated, "Just 2 days," before succumbing to unconsciousness. The scene shifted to a flashback, where Sophia's fiancé gently handed her a golden coin. Its polished surface gleamed in the sunlight as she looked at it curiously. "What's this?" she asked, holding it up for a closer look. With a soft smile, her fiancé replied, "Sophia, have you heard of the Herald Clan?" Sophia nodded, her voice thoughtful. "Ah, yes. They were mentioned in a story my father used to tell me when I was little. They're called the Slayers of Sanctity, and soulless, right?" As her fingers turned the coin over, her fiancé leaned in closer. "That's right. This is the Emperor's gold," he explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "It has the power to summon those soulless beings, the heralds." He moved closer, lowering his tone as though revealing a secret. "But you must be careful, Sophia. If anyone, especially the heretical interrogators of the King's Church, finds out you have this, they won't hesitate to execute you." Before Sophia could respond, he kissed her softly. Her cheeks flushed a warm red as she quickly pushed him away, flustered. Holding the coin in her hand, she asked, "Wait, why are you giving me something so dangerous as a gift?" Her fiancé chuckled, the sound warm and carefree. "I'm giving it to you just in case," he said. If anything ever happens to us, it's said that if you draw a triangle on the ground and place the coin in the middle, a herald will come to your aid. He paused, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Though, I truly hope we'll never have to use it. The flashback dissolved into the present. Sophia, pale and weakened, stared at the triangle she had drawn on the ground. Her trembling hands clutched her fiancé's lifeless body. Her voice was barely audible as she murmured, 2 days, just 2 days if I hold on. Her body, too weary to endure any longer, collapsed to the ground, unmoving. Her breathing slowed as if she were on the brink of death. Meanwhile, in a nearby town, the sound of flowing water echoed through the air as a few soldiers bathed in fresh water. Sir Zebec stood apart from them, his gaze fixed on the clear, cloudless sky. He wiped his brow and thought to himself, it's unusually hot today. Excuse me, sir, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was the young master, his hair wet from bathing. He approached Sir Zebec with an unsettling grin and said, smile. Isn't this fun? Sir Zebec's face darkened with concern. Ignoring the young master's twisted attempt at levity, he asked gravely, if we kill the citizens, how will we collect taxes? The young master, drying his hair with a towel handed to him by a servant, didn't seem fazed by the question. The wanderers, those dissatisfied peasants, are running amok, he said dismissively. The amount of theft is increasing. Sir Zebec clenched his fists, his tone steady, but firm. In the Margrave's territory, there is rich soil. We could evacuate the people there and allow them to start anew. The young master abruptly cut him off, his voice sharp and condescending. And why, he asked, should children born on rich soil suffer because of the failures of these virtue-starved people? Nearby, a soldier paused mid-wash, his interest piqued by the conversation. He watched as the young master continued, his words dripping with arrogance. I'm talking about those who destroy agriculture and flee. Agriculture, the young master declared, relies on skill, soil, the climate, the sky, and the king's divine light. The young master's lips curled into a sinister smile. Isn't that what the king and the church teach us? He asked mockingly. Sir Zebec remained silent, his face a mask of confusion and quiet frustration. The young master added, his tone tinged with self-righteousness, these people are suffering a drought because they were unfaithful to the king's church. That's what the doctrines say, isn't it? With a heavy sigh, Sir Zebec finally responded, that's a broad interpretation. His words hung in the air, heavy with the unspoken conflict between them. As the soldiers raided homes, pillaging every corner of the village, the young master continued his monologue with an air of self-righteousness. Someone enriched the soil, and someone else caused the drought, he said, his tone sharp and calculating. Then, it stands to reason, we should punish the sinners and reward those who made it fertile. They deserve the land. He turned his cold gaze away from Sir Zebec, adding in a chilling tone, everything I do to save the people. His lips twisted into a wicked smile as he walked away, but not before delivering one final taunt. So, if you intend to defy my orders and save them, by all means, give it your best shot. Sir Zebec remained rooted in place, his mind churning with conflicted thoughts as he watched the young master disappear into the distance. When the night finally blanketed the chaos, Sir Zebec made his way to check on Sophia, the blonde-haired girl. His heart sank as he approached her lifeless body lying motionless on the ground. He thought sorrowfully she couldn't endure it. A voice interrupted his thoughts, laced with disdain. It's useless, even if the heralds come now. Before Sir Zebec could react, a black shadow darted past him with inhuman speed. The next moment, the cold steel of a sword rested against his neck. The figure behind him moved like a ghost, giving him no chance to defend himself. His breath hitched. If you move, I'll cut you down where you stand, the person said, their voice calm yet commanding. Don't even think about turning around. Sir Zebec's heart raced as he thought, to swing a sword so precisely, so suddenly, in such a desolate place, his technique is unreal, almost supernatural. He managed to ask, his voice steady despite the tension, are you, a herald? For real? The figure replied, their tone unwavering, I am. Are you a knight or a rescuer? Gathering his composure, Sir Zebec answered, I'm Zebec, from the King's Church. The shadowy figure stepped into the moonlight, revealing a young, strikingly handsome man. His piercing gaze remained fixed on Sir Zebec as he asked, I just wanted to confirm, you're not the contractor, are you? If a holy knight of the King's Church were to summon us, that would certainly be amusing. Sir Zebec's eyes narrowed, his tone turning sharp. Are you trying to humiliate me? The herald's eyes shifted to Sophia's lifeless form. He spoke with a casual indifference that chilled Sir Zebec. Then that girl must be my contractor. But since she's dead, well, I guess I just gained a free gold coin. The herald turned back to Sir Zebec, his expression neutral, but curious. Now, tell me, what exactly is going on here? Sir Zebec hesitated before replying. If you sheath your sword and step back, I'll put my honor on the line and explain everything. In a blur, the young herald vanished, reappearing a safe distance away in the blink of an eye. His movement was so swift and unnatural that Sir Zebec couldn't help but think, is he truly a phantom? The herald smirked, his voice laced with mockery. You seem awfully confident that you wouldn't have been caught off guard if I hadn't ambushed you. Fine. If you're a holy knight of the King's Church, then I suppose you should have some backbone. Go on, impress me. Standing apart on the rocky cliff, Sir Zebec broke the silence, his tone cautious yet probing. Are you a mage? He asked. The boy, Azadin, replied casually, everyone in the Herald Clan is a mage. Except for me, that is. Sir Zebec's brows furrowed. So you're saying that wasn't magic just now? Azadin smirked slightly. It's hard to distinguish superhuman-like physical power from magic. Sir Zebec thought, what is he even saying? He couldn't wrap his head around the boy's cryptic explanation. Sir Zebec asked, what's your name? And what's your rank as a herald? The boy remained silent, his gaze fixed elsewhere. Sir Zebec pressed on. I've already told you my name. I am Zebec, a knight of the King's Church. Azadin tilted his head slightly as if realizing something. Oh, have you? My apologies. With a slight bow of his head, he finally introduced himself. I am Azadin of the 108 Spirits, the Emperor's Herald. Sir Zebec's eyes narrowed as he thought, the 108 Spirits, it's the lowest rank in the Herald Clan. But his movements earlier, they prove he is far from ordinary. Azadin turned his sharp gaze back to Zebec. Now, as promised, tell me what happened here. Both men stood on the cliff overlooking the devastated town below. Azadin listened intently as Sir Zebec recounted the events. When the story ended, Azadin nodded slowly, taking in the gravity of it all. Suddenly, a voice echoed above them. The contract has been established. Startled, Sir Zebec looked up to see an owl soaring toward them, its wings cutting through the night sky. The bird landed gracefully on Azadin's shoulder, unfazed by the tension in the air. The owl spoke, its tone formal yet indifferent. You responded to the request, but the requester has died. It seems you have earned some free gold coins. Azadin of 108 Spirits. Azadin remained calm, his expression unreadable. Sir Zebec, however, was taken aback, thinking, talking owl? What kind of sorcery is this? The owl continued, now, move on to complete the next mission. Do not rest, start immediately, Azadin of 108 Spirits. Azadin let out a faint sigh, clearly annoyed, and began to turn away. Sir Zebec called after him. Wait. Just because the requester died, you're going to collect your reward and leave? Azadin stopped, looking over his shoulder. Do you want the request fulfilled? How peculiar. Your master will suffer for it, you know. Unsheathing his sword, Sir Zebec glared at him. That won't happen, you soulless heretic. Because I will defeat you. Azadin smiled faintly, his voice calm yet cutting. To think you'd raise your blade against me with a sword that remained silent before true injustice. How tragic, even for you. Sir Zebec's grip on his sword tightened as anger flared within him. Azadin added, are you angry? At me? Or at yourself, for turning your back on injustice? Images of the atrocities he'd witnessed flashed through Sir Zebec's mind. He clenched his teeth, shouting, what do you know? Azadin's gaze softened, almost pitying. Sir Zebec asked, why bring this up now? What do you want to prove? Azadin added, humans may see the same thing, but they feel it differently. To some, a figure might appear as the hero of a myth, while to others, he's just a faint, flickering light in the darkness. He walked past Zebec, toward the lifeless bodies of Safiya and her fiancé. Just as the sight of their suffering appears different to you compared to the other soldiers who stood by. Sir Zebec lowered his sword, his resolve wavering. No, it is no different, he admitted. His voice was heavy with regret. Because I couldn't do anything. As a knight of the King's Church, I must revere those who bear the bloodline of the Divine King. Azadin turned back to him. I do not wish to fight you, holy knight. If you felt even a shred of pity for that girl. Azadin cut the ropes holding Safiya's fiancé and gently laid his body on the ground. Then your sword is no enemy of mine. Sir Zebec stood in silence, guilt written across his face. Azadin picked up the lifeless bodies of Safiya and her fiancé, cradling them with care. He looked at Sir Zebec and asked, do you have a shovel? Zebec blinked in confusion. A shovel? Are you going to bury them? Azadin nodded solemnly. I'll hold a funeral for them. Sir Zebec thought to himself, Cazelle thrives on displays of power, hanging these corpses, turning them into undead. and making them scream in eternal agony would serve as a macabre monument to his dominance. Burying them is tantamount to a direct challenge against him. Lost in thought, Sir Zebec suddenly noticed Azadin kneeling by the ground, digging graves with his bare hands. Dirt covered his fingers, but his focus was unyielding. Sir Zebec couldn't contain himself any longer. He let out a quiet sigh, placed his sword down, and joined in, using his hands to dig beside him. After the graves were dug, Azadin clasped his hands together and began to pray. His voice was steady yet somber. "O Archangel of wisdom, courage, and mercy, have mercy on their souls." Sir Zebec froze, utterly taken aback. "A man of the Herald Clan, using the prayer of the Rescuer's order?" he asked, his tone filled with disbelief. Azadin seemed surprised by the question, but chuckled softly. "I like their ideology," he replied casually, brushing dirt off his hands. Sir Zebec's mind raced. What a reckless and audacious man. To abandon the fate of his bloodline and align himself with the faith of heresy, truly brazen. Azadin's expression grew serious as he looked at the freshly dug graves. "If I don't uphold what I believe is right, then my birth has no meaning." Curiosity gnawed at Sir Zebec, and he asked, "What do you like about the Rescuer's order?" Before Azadin could answer, he suddenly turned his head sharply. His movements were swift as he reached for his bow. "From that direction," he said, his eyes narrowing. "An individual you seem to revere is approaching." Sir Zebec followed Azadin's gaze and felt a cold chill. It was the young master, riding toward them on horseback, with a group of soldiers in tow. The young master sneered, his voice laced with mockery. Well, look at you. Did you take a liking to that pathetic farmer woman? You should have said something. I would have let you keep her, Sir Zebec." Azadin's grip on his bow tightened as the young master's piercing gaze shifted to him. "And who the hell is this bastard?" the young master asked, his tone filled with venom. Azadin answered with action. He released his arrow, and it sliced through the air with unerring precision, striking a soldier at the rear straight in the eye. The man crumpled to the ground. Panic rippled through the soldiers. Sir Zebec stood frozen in awe. He hit the farthest soldier, in these conditions? Azadin fired another arrow. It tore through the air, curving unnaturally mid-flight, and pierced an iron shield as though it were paper. The arrow buried itself deep into the soldier behind it, who fell to his knees with a strangled cry. The other soldiers recoiled in terror, their confidence shattered. Sir Zebec's heart pounded as he observed the impossible. That arrow, it pierced through both the shield and the armor, and it moved like a living creature. Amid the chaos, Azadin spoke, his voice calm yet firm, as if the battle was a mere inconvenience. "You asked me earlier what I liked about the Rescuer's order, didn't you?" Sir Zebec remained silent, his gaze fixed on Azadin, who radiated an eerie calmness even in the face of danger. Azadin continued, "I liked their belief that a person's worth isn't determined by their birth, but by their beliefs and actions. Because someone born with the blood of the divine king, someone who rapes and massacres his people, cannot be considered noble." The young master's expression twisted into one of unbridled rage. Grinding his teeth, his voice erupted in a furious roar. You son of a bitch." The young master, consumed with rage, pointed his trembling finger at Azadin and shouted at Sir Zebec, "Zebec, this is an order, kill that bastard now." His voice cracked with desperation. Azadin, calm and composed, leapt into the air with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. As he ascended, the soldiers below panicked, their formations breaking. With his bow drawn mid-air, Azadin released a volley of arrows that struck his targets with unerring precision. Cries of pain and confusion erupted as soldiers fell. When Azadin landed with feline agility, the remaining soldiers rallied and screamed, "Get him! Die!" But before they could act, Azadin stepped on the shaft of a spear, using it as a springboard to launch himself back into the air. The soldiers gasped in disbelief at his impossible maneuverability. While airborne, Azadin drew and released 3 arrows simultaneously. Each arrow found its mark, piercing through soldiers' eyes or groins with surgical accuracy. One arrow whistled past the young master, grazing his cheek and drawing blood. Frozen in shock, the young master thought, "He isn't trying to kill us, he's crippling us." Another arrow struck a soldier directly in the groin, and a scream echoed through the battlefield. Overwhelmed with fear, the young master bellowed, "You bastard, who the hell are you?" "To that, I'd say, he is Azadin, the 108 balls collector." Suddenly, Azadin appeared behind the young master as if he had materialized from thin air. In a low, chilling voice, he introduced himself, "My name is Azadin. I am a herald." The young master's face turned pale. The weight of those words hit him like a boulder. "A herald, here?" The soldiers around him recoiled in terror as they muttered, "He's soulless." Fear rippled through the ranks. Azadin reached over his shoulder for another arrow, only to find his quiver empty. Seeing this, the young master's fear transformed into a flicker of hope. "He doesn't have any arrows," he shouted to rally his men. Before the words even finished leaving his lips, Azadin's fist collided with the young master's face, sending him flying. The impact was so strong it echoed like thunder. As the young master landed on the ground, writhing in pain and clutching his face, Azadin calmly removed his bowstring and tucked his bow away. Where he hid it, who knows? Standing atop a horse with effortless balance, Azadin gazed down at the battlefield. The young master lay on the ground, crying in agony, "My eye! My eye!" His screams filled the night. Behind Azadin, a soldier saw an opening and lunged. Without even turning, Azadin dodged the attack and delivered a swift punch to the soldier's eye, eliciting another wail of, "My eye! My eye!" Azadin picked up a sword from the ground, examining it briefly. "I've already thinned your numbers with my arrows," he said, his tone dripping with confidence. "If any of you are brave enough, come and face me." But not a single soldier moved. Fear had paralyzed them, his eyes scanning the trembling men before him. Then, as if remembering something important, he muttered, "Ah, I almost forgot." Then, Azadin struck the soldier lying on the ground with his sword, directly targeting his groin. The soldiers collectively froze, beads of sweat rolling down their faces. Some nearly lost control of their bladders as Azadin's calm, calculating gaze fell on them. From a distance, the owl watched the scene unfold, thinking, "Why is he so obsessed with castration? He's absolutely insane." And so, Azadin achieved what no warrior had done before. He successfully castrated all the soldiers. A grotesque achievement, but one that sent a message: Azadin does not tolerate injustice. Azadin then turned his attention to the young master, who was feebly trying to crawl away. Each movement was slow and pitiful, a stark contrast to the arrogance he had displayed earlier. Azadin loomed over him like an executioner. "You waited a long time for this, didn't you?" Azadin's voice was low and venomous. "Trash like you, who inflicts pain on the people, deserves nothing less." Standing next to the whimpering young master, Azadin gripped his sword tightly. His quiver was empty, though perhaps he had recovered some arrows from the fallen soldiers. As Azadin raised his sword, preparing to deliver judgment, a sudden golden light burst forth, blinding everyone around. A soldier cried out in alarm, "I'm going blind." The battlefield was consumed by the radiant glow, leaving everyone in awe and fear. The young master let out a sinister laugh and declared, "Did you see that? This is my magic, proof that noble blood, incomparable to yours, flows within me." His arrogance filled the air as he basked in his so-called divine power. Before the young master could finish his grandiose statement, Azadin swung his sword with lightning speed. A sharp, clean sound cut through the tension, followed by a splash of crimson. For a moment, the young master looked unfazed, but then his eyes widened as he glanced down. Utter shock consumed him when he realized what had been severed. His most precious thing was no longer attached. Yes, that thing. If you get it, feel free to write about it in the comments. I happen to love bananas. The young master's scream of panic pierced the night, so loud it seemed capable of waking the dead. Honestly, I felt his agony too. He cried out, his voice trembling with desperation, "What the hell have you done to me?" Azadin, ever the embodiment of mockery, replied with a smirk, "Are you really this slow? You still don't know when I did it to you? How unfortunate." Azadin grabbed the young master by his silver hair, dragging him closer. The young master, now reduced to a pitiful figure, pleaded, "What do you want? Money? Women? Swords? Name it, and it's yours." I'm a descendant of the sacred Yaiga's holy family." Azadin, unimpressed, responded coldly, "Really? Unfortunately for you, I am a Slayer of Sanctity, a Herald. That title doesn't exactly make me a fan of your so-called sacred bloodline." The young master's eyes darted to Sir Zebec, who stood nearby, holding his head as if trying to suppress a headache. The young master screamed desperately, Sir Zebec, what are you doing? Help me." But Sir Zebec, clearly done with the entire situation, sighed and replied with exasperation, "I can't see." Horrified, the young master turned back to Azadin and screamed, "You bastard! I'm a noble. I come from a sacred bloodline. Just because I did that to some commoners, you think?" Azadin cut him off mid-rant with a cold, detached tone. "Come to think of it, I have a feeling you'll continue living with vigor after this." The young master's face twisted in confusion as he stared at Azadin, who now held two gleaming daggers in his hands. The reflection of the blades danced menacingly in the young master's terrified eyes. Azadin's voice was calm, but dripping with finality. "That's the right attitude. Live positively. Trust me, you'll need it more than ever." In one swift motion, Azadin brought the daggers down, severing, well, you know what. The young master collapsed to the ground, a pitiful heap of agony and despair. Azadin stood over him, an unshaken figure of judgment, and said with a chillingly calm tone, I don't have a contractor, but I think I've been considerate. The Emperor's law has been fulfilled. And with that, the Slayer of Sanctity walked away, leaving the young master to contemplate his new, irrevocable reality. Then Sir Zebec unsheathed his sword and said to Azadin, I am a knight of the Church of the King. I cannot leave you, who speaks of the Emperor's law, b. Sir Zebec held his sword with both hands, ready to attack Azadin, and said, no matter if you perform righteous deeds. Azadin dropped his sword next to the young master, whose eyes were both missing, and said, ah, geez. Azadin pointed his finger at Sir Zebec and said, you aren't like the other knights of the Church of the King. Hearing this, Sir Zebec felt insulted and shouted at Azadin, you dare insult me? Azadin raised his hand and said, no, it was praise. With a serious expression, Azadin continued, the other knights of the Church of the King are nothing but scoundrels forcibly expelled from their homes due to matters of inheritance. Sir Zebec responded, that's, but Azadin interrupted him, saying, anyway. As he turned into black fog, Azadin asked Sir Zebec, will you be able to follow after me? Sir Zebec looked shocked and said what? Before completely disappearing, Azadin said, let's meet again if fate wills it, Sir Zebec. Azadin's figure completely disappeared, leaving Sir Zebec with the disabled body of the young master lying on the ground. Sir Zebec covered his face with his hand to avoid the black fog and looked toward the direction where it had vanished. Nearby, a soldier was groaning in pain. Sir Zebec thought to himself, nobody was able to kill Azadin of the Herald Clan. We were left with permanent losses instead. Scoundrels forcibly expelled from their homes due to matters of inheritance. He's not wrong. That applies to me just as well. Sir Zebec smiled and said, geez. Looking up at the sky, Sir Zebec said, I can feel a weight off my chest now. The scene shifted to a palace where a figure was sitting on a chair. Several people were bowing in front of him, pleading for mercy. One of them said, my lord, please exempt us from taxes this year. Keeping his head lowered, the man added, I beg of you. All the people are running and becoming nomads, and those who have starved to death are wandering the streets as undead. We are overrun with thieves and monsters, and I apologize, but we cannot afford to pay taxes. After listening to this, the man looked unfazed and said with an expressionless demeanor, how shameless. The man's name was revealed to be Margrave Cazelle, the father of the young master, now permanently disabled. With an evil look, Margrave Cazelle said, at this rate, you would surely begin asking for rations as well. The people felt the weight of his words, trembling in fear, and replied, please excuse us, we are at our wits' end right now. Margrave Cazelle, speaking with seriousness and authority, said, nothing will change the lowly blood that flows within you. If you wish, I will provide relief. The people looked confused and asked in low voices, what, truly? Cazelle replied in a serious tone, yes. Then, with a demonic smile, he added, on the condition that if you cannot comply with my request, then all of you will be hanged. The people raised their heads and looked at him, confused and terrified. Margrave Cazelle conjured a flame in his hand and said, fear not. The flame transformed into a book, and Cazelle said, what you are asking for amounts to nothing more than a single page. Such is the nature of this grimoire. A few people looked at the book and said in fearful tones, a grimoire. We are ignorant of magic and do not know of such things. Cazelle, with a smiling tone, replied, no. Even ignorant fools like you will be able to find it. If you simply wish for it, it will respond to your call and reveal itself. Bringing them back from their thoughts, Cazelle offered, if you manage to bring me a grimoire like this, I will exempt your village from taxes for 3 years and provide 50 bushels each of wheat, barley, and oats. Hearing such a generous offer, the people looked shocked. How could such an evil person offer such a kind reward? One person, trembling, asked in a fearful tone, excuse me, but do we not at least need to know the name of that grimoire so that we may be able to search for it? Cazelle clenched his hand, making the fire and book disappear. With a very serious expression, he replied, a copy of the Book of the Divine King. Hearing his words, the people were stunned and said, what? Cazelle dismissed them without another word. While Cazelle was sitting on his throne, thinking about how to find the Book of the Divine King, a snake entered the room. The snake raised its head, and as Cazelle looked at it, the snake transformed into a beautiful woman. She said, I feel that mentioning the name of the Book of the Divine King was rather careless, Count. Listening to her, Cazelle replied, nonsense. You all are already searching here and there for the grimoire, are you not? Rumors will spread across the continent either way. It'd be wiser to find even a single page before then. Then Cazelle asked the snake woman, so, what is it, witch? Sitting at Cazelle's feet, the snake woman said, I am obliged to say, that your son has fallen victim in the eastern part of the continent, Sir Cazelle. Cazelle interrupted her without changing his expression. Cazelle's forces wouldn't fall so easily. Sir Zebec is with him as well. The snake woman responded, their opponent was the Herald Clan. Cazelle, with a serious expression, said, the Herald Clan? Well, I'm sure they too are after the Book of the Divine King. If they wish to be free of the curse of their duty, they will surely need the Book of the Divine King, after all. Then Cazelle asked the snake woman, is Cazelle dead? She replied, I've heard that he's lost sight in both eyes, and his reproductive organs are damaged. Looking at him intently, the snake woman inquired, what will you do now? Reaching his hand toward the snake woman, Cazelle said, send soldiers to their vicinity, and kill the Herald Clan. As the snake woman placed her hand in Cazelle's, she said, I understand. I will make contact with the commander. Cazelle interrupted her by pulling her wrist and said, no, command someone else to do so. The snake woman was now sitting in Cazelle's lap, and he said, if my child has been castrated, then I can just make another. If you want snake mommy, then write in the comments, snake mommy, come and bite me. Cazelle placed his hand on the snake woman. The rest was history, you know what I mean. Let's go back to the story. Azadin was walking in the eastern lands, where the ground was dry due to the lack of rain. His owl was sitting on his shoulder as he walked, and Azadin said, this is bad. I'll die of thirst at this rate. Why did you have to put on a show, saying you'd make it in 2 days? You foolish spirit. The owl replied, you dare speak so impertinently to the emperor's mouth? Azadin looked at the owl and said, huh. The owl remained silent. Azadin continued, frankly, because the emperor went and died without any plans, we, once his heralds, are now despised by people all over the world. We're referred to as the Slayers of Sanctity and soulless heretics. Hearing this, the owl began sweating, but Azadin kept speaking. On top of that, because you put on a show to the contractors, I gave up on taking any luggage with me and came running as fast as I could. Thanks to that, I'm so thirsty I could die. I only have dried goods to eat, and I don't think I'd even be able to digest them. So, I guess I'll die from starvation too. The owl stammered, I apologize for that. However, soon, your servant will. Suddenly, the owl stopped. Both of them looked ahead and saw blue lights gathering. Azadin thought, ghosts? The blue lights gathered and turned into people. Azadin said, ah, the people hanging from the trees. Among them were the blonde girl and her fiancé. They looked happy together and bowed their heads. Seeing this, Azadin said to them, yes, hello. He then asked the spirits, this land has neither the light of the king's virtue nor the blessing of the archangels, so it is not good to stay here for long. I've repaid your grudges, so please move on to the afterlife. The blonde girl and her fiancé walked next to Azadin. The blonde girl pointed somewhere. When Azadin turned, he saw a well. He thought, a well? Then he walked toward it and said to them, do you mean to give me water? You didn't have to. You could have just gone to rest. Looking inside the well, Azadin pulled up the bucket to get water. While pulling, he thought, I want to taste it already. When the bucket came out, he saw a glowing paper inside. Azadin exclaimed, what's this?